Actually, it was a fine one about the ballet art or the ballet art. Let's answer the questions now together. Number 6, what's the lecture mainly about? Of course, this is a stereotype question with all lectures if you can note that. So introductions are very important. Once you take notes, make sure that you hear the introduction very well because you may face the first question as on introduction. So please make sure that you make notes or take notes on introduction like this question. What's the lecture mainly about? It's about Catherine, the métier, entertainment, the figures for court dancing, the development of ballet, the relationship between dance and meals. Of course, it's the development of ballet. So number 6 is letter C, the development of ballet. Next, listen to the following. So I will have them for you next time, okay? Okay then, let's begin our discussion of the ballet. Why does the professor say this? Okay then, let's see the choices that we will have here. To end his explanation and begin the lecture, to apologize to the students about their tests, to comment about the students' grades, to regain the attention of the class. Of course, to regain the attention of the class. So letter D is the perfect and suitable answer for this question, to regain the attention of the class. According to the professor, what does the term balletti mean? Balletti, it's an Italian term, by the way. It's a dramatic story, a parade of horses, a dance done in figures, an outdoor entertainment. Of course, the right answer, yes, letter C, a dance done in figures. So balletti mean a dance done in figures. Okay. How did the early choreographers accommodate the abilities of amateur performers? Of course, it's letter A. The steps were quite simple. The steps were quite simple. Number 10. Why does the professor mention that he checked several references about the length of Queen Louise's ballet? He was very interested in the ballet. He didn't know much about it. He wasn't sure that it was accurate. He wanted to impress the class. Yeah? Of course, if you're confused, you can find yourself confused between A and D, right? A and D. He was very interested in the ballet or he wanted to impress the class. If someone does so or checked several references, this means that, very simply, he was interested in the ballet. Of course, as a teacher, I don't want to show off in front of my students, but I want to show that I'm interested in the topic itself, so make them also on the same track to be interested too, not just to impress them and make one-man show in front of them. So the right answer, he was very interested in the ballet. Next. 11. What can be inferred about the professor? He's not very polite to his class. He encourages the students to participate. He's not very interested in the topic. He is probably a good dancer. What do you think? Yeah, it's a very good question. What do you think? Of course, he's not very polite to his class. You're going to eliminate this. He is not very interested in the topic. You're going to eliminate that also. So the confusion here will be between letter B, he encourages the students to participate, and he's probably a good dancer. What do you think? I'm talking about the professor himself, not the students. That's why the answer, he is probably a good dancer. He is probably a good dancer. This is a conclusion that you come up with, okay, through the data given during the track itself. So this conclusion is based on the data, okay? So he's probably a good dancer because I can, or we can guess this as students or as listeners to the track. He's interested. He has a lot of data about ballet. He's giving his students different different ideas about how this kind of art has been developed all over the time and all of this stuff. So he's probably a good dancer. Now with another class, which is linguistics class. Linguistics class. So we're going to have something related to linguistics of the language itself, which is a completely different topic with a different class. Go there, be here after you finish.
Listen to part of a discussion in a linguistics class.
What comes to mind when I say the word grammar?
That's easy. English class and lots of rules.
Memorizing parts of speech, like nouns and verbs.
Diagramming sentences.
Well, yes, that's fairly typical, but today we're going to look at grammar from the point of view of the linguist. And to do that, we really have to consider three distinct grammars for every language. The first grammar is referred to as a mental grammar, and that's what a speaker of a language knows often implicitly about the grammar of that language. This has also been called linguistic competence, and from that term, competence grammar has become popular. I like to think of it of mental or competence grammar. I like to think of it as an incredibly complex system that allows a speaker to produce language that other speakers can understand. It includes the sounds, the vocabulary, the order of words and sentences, and even the appropriateness of a topic or a word in a particular social situation. And what's so amazing is that most of us carry this knowledge around in our heads and use it without much reflection. One way to clarify mental or competence grammar is to ask a friend a question about a sentence. Your friend probably won't know why it's correct, but that friend will know if it's correct. So, one of the features of mental or competence grammar is this incredible sense of correctness and the ability to hear something that sounds odd in a language. Haven't you had the experience of hearing a sentence and it stood out to you? It just wasn't quite right. For native speakers, we can call this ability native intuition. But even language learners who've achieved a high level of competence in a second language will be able to give similar intuitive responses even if they can't explain the rules. So, that's mental grammar or competence grammar. Okay then, that brings us to the second type of grammar, and this is what linguists are most concerned about. This is descriptive grammar, which is a description of what the speakers know intuitively about a language. Linguists try to discover the underlying rules of mental or competence grammar and describe them objectively. So descriptive grammar is a model of competence grammar, and as such it has to be based on the best effort of a linguist, and consequently subject to criticism and even disagreement from other linguists. Because no matter how skilled a linguist is, describing grammar is an enormous task. In the first place, the knowledge is incredibly vast and complex. In the second place, the language itself is changing even while it's being described. And finally, the same data can be organized in different but equally correct ways in order to arrive at generalizations. And the ultimate goal of a descriptive grammar is to formulate generalizations about a language that accurately reflect the mental rules that speakers have in their heads. But getting back to what most people think of as grammar, the grammar that we may have learned in school, that's very different from either competence grammar or descriptive grammar because the rules aren't meant to describe language at all. They're meant to prescribe and judge language as good or bad. And this kind of grammar is called, not surprisingly, prescriptive grammar because of its judgmental perspective. Again, to contrast prescriptive grammar with descriptive grammar, just think of descriptive generalizations as accepting the language that a speaker uses in an effort to describe it and recognizing that there may be several dialects that are used by various groups of speakers and that any one speaker will probably choose to use different language depending on the formality, for example, of the situation. On the other hand, prescriptive rules are rigid and subject to enforcement. Prescriptivists want to make all speakers conform to one standard in all situations, and that tends to be a very formal level of language all the time. Now, which of these types of grammar do you think you were learning in school when you had to memorize parts of speech and rules and diagram sentences?
Sounds like prescriptive grammar to me.
Precisely. But how did prescriptive rules get to be accepted, at least in the schools? And probably even more important, why are so many of these rules disregarded even by well-educated speakers in normal situations?
Did you say disregarded?
I did. Some of you may recall that during the 17th and 18th centuries in Europe, Latin was considered the perfect language and was used by the educated classes. The argument for the perfection of Latin was reinforced by the fact that Latin had become a written language, and consequently, Latin had stopped changing in the normal ways that spoken languages do. So the rules were also fixed, and for many writers of English during that period, the rules of Latin were held as a standard for all languages, including English. But the problem was that English had a different origin and very different constructions. For example, how many times have you heard the prescriptive rule, never end a sentence with a preposition? This is a Latin rule, but it doesn't apply to English. So it sounds very formal and even strange when this Latin rule is enforced. Now, how many of you would say, what are we waiting for? I think most of us would prefer it to, for what are we waiting? But as you see, this breaks the rule, the Latin rule, that is.
So we're really learning Latin rules in English classes. No wonder I was confused. But wouldn't you think that, well, that things would change? I mean, Latin hasn't been recognized as a world language for a long time.
You're right, but the reason that prescriptive rules survive is the school system. Teachers promote the prescriptive grammar as the standard for the school and, consequently, for the educated class. And good language is a requisite for social mobility, even when it's very dissimilar to the mental grammar or the descriptive grammar of a language.
"12. What is the discussion mainly about?" "13. How does the professor make his point about native intuition?" "14. What are two key problems for descriptive grammar?" "15. Listen again to part of the lecture and then answer the following question.
But how did prescriptive rules get to be accepted, at least in the schools? And probably even more important, why are so many of these rules disregarded even by well-educated speakers in normal situations?
Did you say disregarded?
Why does the student say this?
Did you say disregarded?
"16. According to the professor, why were Latin rules used for English grammar?" "17. Why does the professor discuss the rule to avoid ending a sentence with a preposition?
Okay, welcome back. Let's answer the questions on this linguistic class lecture. 12. What's the lecture mainly about? So again, it's a question about the introduction. If you've got your notes, you'll be able to answer this very easily. So it's about, of course, the different types of grammar. The different types of grammar. 13. How does the professor make his point about native intuition? A. He explains how to perform an easy experiment. He tells the class about his personal experience. He provides several examples of sentences. He contrasts it with non-native intuition. Of course, the answer, letter C. He provides several examples of sentences. So number 13, the best answer for it is letter C. He provides several examples of sentences. 14. What are two key problems for descriptive grammar? Click to answer two choices. So with such kind of question, again, we're going to have like two choices, not just one. The information is very complicated and subject to change. The formal language must be enforced in all situations. The language can be organized correctly in more than one way. The description takes time because linguistics must agree. So the two choices, letter A is one of them. The information is very complicated and subject to change. Letter C, the language can be organized correctly in more than one way. So the right two choices for number 14 is letter A, letter C. Letter A and letter C. Listen to this, Professor, but how did prospective rules get to be accepted, at least in schools? And probably even important, why are so many of these rules disregarded even by well-educated speakers in normal situations? Did you say disregarded? Why does the student say this? Did you say disregarded? Of course, the answer, she's confirming that she has understood. So this letter B, she's confirming that she has understood. According to the professor, why were Latin rules used for English grammar? Why were Latin rules used for English grammar? Of course, the answer, you're confused between C and D. English and Latin have many vocabulary words in common. English was taking the place of Latin among educated Europeans. Yes, the right answer, don't be confused, it's very easy to capture, is letter C. English and Latin have many vocabulary words in common. So the best answer for number 16 is letter C. English and Latin have many vocabulary words in common. Why does the professor discuss the rule to avoid ending a sentence with a preposition? It's a good example of way that descriptive grammar is used. It shows the students how to use formal grammar in their speech. It's a way to introduce a humorous story into the lecture. It demonstrates the problem in using Latin rules for English. Which one? Yeah, exactly. It's letter R. It's a good example of way that descriptive grammar is used. So the best answer for number 17 is letter R. Now, with this colleague campus lecture, so it's going to be between friends. Go there, and I'm waiting you here.
Listen to part of a conversation on campus between two students.
I didn't see you at the International Talent Show.
No time for that kind of thing.
You mean you don't belong to the ISA?
The ISA?
International Student Association.
Oh no, I don't belong to any clubs.
But this isn't like a regular club.
How so?
Well, we have a house. You know, the brick house on Fraternity Row.
You live there, right?
Yeah, I moved in last year. It's really inexpensive because we take care of the house ourselves and we cook our own meals.
That sounds like it would take a lot of time.
Not really. There's a list of chores posted every week, and you can choose something you like to do. So I usually put my name down for yard work. I like being outside, so it's fun for me.
But you have to cook too, right?
Okay, it's like this. 20 of us live there, so every night 2 of the guys cook and 2 of the guys clean up. So you only have to cook about once a week and clean up once.
What about breakfast and lunch?
Oh, well, you're on your own for that. But the dinners are just fantastic. It's like eating in a different ethnic restaurant every night. You know, because the guys are from different countries.
Well, that sounds good.
And it costs about half what it did to live in the dorm. But really, I'm doing it because it's a great experience living with people from so many different countries. My best friend in the house is from Korea. My roommate's from Brazil. And I've got friends from, well, just about everywhere.
But you don't have to live in the house to belong to the club.
No. There are about 100 members in the International Student Association. Only guys live in the house. But there are a lot of women in the association.
I wish I had time to do it. It really sounds interesting.
You've got to relax sometimes. Anyway, we meet at the house the first Friday of the month from 7 to 10. We have a buffet dinner, and after that, we have a short meeting. That's when we plan our activities, like the talent show and picnics and dances. Then a lot of the people stay for music and a party, but some people leave after the meeting.
So it's only a couple hours a month?
Right. Listen, why don't you come over next Friday for the meeting, as my guest, I mean. You have to eat anyway, and if you have a good time, you can think about joining.
Next Friday? Well, I don't know. I usually study on Friday night, but I could take a break. Sure, I'll come over, but I might have to leave early.
Great.
18. What is the purpose of this conversation? (19) What does the man imply about the house where he is living? (20) How does the man feel about the International Student Association? (21) Listen again to part of the conversation, and then answer the following question.
Then a lot of the people stay for music and a party, but some people leave after the meeting.
So it's only a couple hours a month?
What does the woman mean when she says this?
So it's only a couple hours a month?
(22) What does the woman agree to do